please be seated. Members of the jury, welcome back. Thank you for your patience. During trial, it is sometimes necessary to permit a witness to testify out of the regular order. And in this case, the court is allowing a defense witness to testify during the state's case in chief due to scheduling conflicts. The order of witnesses should not affect your evaluation of the testimony given. Mr. Kading, call your first witness, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. This time I'll call Dr. Jennifer Stankis.
Dr. Stankis, come forward, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be true and correct?
I do.
Please be seated. Mr. Kading may inquire when you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Dr. Stankis.
Good afternoon.
Would you please state your full name, spell your last name for the record, please?
Sure. Jennifer Stankis, Stankus.
And Dr. Stankis, could you tell us what your education history is?
Sure. I'm an emergency physician. I went to medical school at the University of Washington. Before that, I went to law school at the University of Denver. And before that, I went to undergraduate at the University of Colorado at Boulder.
And what kind of work do you do?
I'm an emergency physician. I practice at Madigan Army Medical Center as clinical faculty in the emergency department.
Okay, and what else do you do for work?
So at this point, over the last few years, I've been about half-time clinical medically, and then the other half of my time is split between doing some expert work like this and other work that's not related to medicine.
Okay, and are you a member of any professional associations?
I am. I'm a fellow of the American College of Emergency Physicians and a former chairperson of the Emergency Medicine Foundation and a diplomat of the American Board of Emergency Medicine.
Okay, and Dr. Stankis, have you ever qualified to be a expert witness before?
Yes.
Okay, and what field do you expert witness in?
So I'm asked to opine on medical questions, and that can be in civil cases or like this in criminal cases. So it's been a pretty broad range of cases.
Okay. And you indicated you were an expert witness, so are you paid to be here?
I am.
Okay. And does the fact that you're being paid have any influence on your testimony?
No.
And is the amount you're being paid a customary amount?
Yes.
Okay. So we are here on the case of State versus Ali and Ali. Have you had an opportunity to review the medical records in this case?
I have.
And have you reviewed anything else?
Yes.
What else did you review?
I reviewed the police reports and also the videos.
Okay. And you saw the bus video and also the handheld phone videos?
I did.
Okay. And when you reviewed those records and that video, did the diagnosis and things that you found in the medical reports, did that seem consistent with what you viewed and read?
It did.
Okay. And one of the things that was an issue, that's going to be an issue in this case, is something called pneumomediastinum. Could you please tell us what that is?
Sure. Pneumo just means air. Mediastinum is the central cavity in the chest. It's the area, basically, media is middle, and stinum, you can think of your sternum, so it's the cavity there. Pneumomediastinum means that there's air in that cavity, and there shouldn't be air in that cavity. There should be air in your trachea and in your lungs and in your esophagus sometimes. But it means that there's air inside that cavity, which is unusual.
Okay. And so can you tell us how typically does that air get there?
So it's not a highly common condition, but it does happen.
Okay. And are there, what are some of the different ways it can happen?
So the worst way it can happen is if you are shot or stabbed or some sort of penetration into the chest cavity that actually punctures punctures your lung, punctures the chest wall, punctures your trachea or your esophagus. That would be a very bad day. Other causes, believe it or not, it can happen with a sneezing fit or vomiting or weightlifting or bearing down. And the reason is that think of your lungs as like a big balloon. You take in the air, it goes into your lungs and it travels out to the small little air sacs at the end called alveoli. And if you put too much pressure into that, like anything, you can basically pop it. So you can have a situation where you bear down or you're holding your breath and like say someone jumps on top of you or a dog or something like that can actually pop that alveoli. Another way that can happen is if any of you are scuba divers, you hold your breath, something bad happens, you freak out, you pop to the surface and you forget to exhale. Well, all those gases are going to expand and create more pressure. So it's a pressure issue. And then the other way is you can sometimes tear the esophagus, for example. And the way that can happen is with violent vomiting or some sort of penetrating trauma. We call that Boerhaave syndrome.
Okay. All right. So was that B-O-R, Boerhaave?
You're asking me to spell something that's not fair. I think it's B-O-E-R. I'd have to Google it.
Okay. And when the air in your lungs is trapped and the pressure is applied to it, what is that? What is that called? Is that the Macklin effect?
Yes, it commonly occurs, most commonly I would say, and that would be that effect where you're bearing down like a Valsalva. You're increasing the inner thoracic pressure too much.
Okay. Now, in terms of generalities, is pneumomediastinum, is that something that's common in strangulation cases?
No.
And have you ever seen it in a strangulation case?
I've seen it. So I've reviewed many strangulation cases, and I have seen it in one case where I don't think that it occurred from that, but rather from being dragged from behind and struggling on the ground.
Okay. And obviously it could be common in a stabbing offense or something like that, right?
Fortunately, I wouldn't say it's common, but it does occur.
Okay. Now, the different ways that it can happen, are some of them considered more serious in terms of diagnosis than others? I mean, in terms of what you're going to do to treat them?
What I would say is that it's not so much the mechanism, but rather the effect. So there can be a very small air leak that is a one-time air leak that doesn't persist, and it goes away on its own. And that could happen from any number of things. Let's say you have a very small puncture, it heals over, and you just have a one-time air leak versus the Macklin effect where you're sneezing or coughing and you have a small little air leak. What matters is if you have a persistent or a large air leak that can create pressure inside the chest, it can actually cause a pneumothorax, if you've ever heard of that, where there's too much air in the chest and it starts to collapse a lung. You can have the air in the mediastinum that's actually putting pressure on the heart. The heart's just a big pump, so if you are creating a lot of outside pressure on it, it won't pump as well. It won't be able to do its job. And then the other way that things can go sideways is if you have a tear, especially in your esophagus, what that can do is allow the stomach contents into the or the mediastinum, not pneumo, but the mediastinum, and those contents can create a bad infection. You can become septic, and that can kill you as well. So it's not so much a matter of what the mechanism is, but what the effect is.
Okay. And how do you recognize a pneumomediastinum?
So Most typically, we'll see it on a chest x-ray. So in a lot of cases, someone will come in with chest pain, or they'll come in as a trauma, and we get an immediate look to make sure that there's nothing dangerous going on. And we can see air very well on x-rays where it's not where it's supposed to be.
Okay. And so once you see that, is it pretty easy to diagnose what it is?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell me, how do you typically treat it?
So it depends on what it is. So sometimes it's very serious. Say a gunshot wound, they'll have to go in and resect part of the lung or clamp it to stop that air leak, or put in a chest tube. Sometimes a surgeon will have to go in and repair the esophagus. A lot of times we just watch the patient. So about 80 to 90% of the time, the condition is not anything that we need to do anything about, and we'd consider it to be benign, meaning harmless. It's there, but we need to watch it and make sure it doesn't persist or get worse.
Okay. And is there any particular time limit on how long that may take?
Well, typically, if we saw a small amount of air on a chest x-ray, for example, but the patient's vital signs were stable, they weren't having any trouble breathing, everything else looked okay, we would typically watch them for 24 hours and retest and make sure that the condition isn't getting worse and that it's getting better.
Okay. And in your reading of the records in this case, did you note when the condition was first noted?
Yes, it would have been on arrival to the emergency department.
Okay. And did you then also note in the same records when it was determined that it was no longer an issue?
Yes.
And when was that?
The following day.
Okay. So do you recall, was it less than 24 hours later that the condition was no longer noted?
I believe it was.
Okay. Now, upon reviewing the medical records in this case and the videos in this case, is it possible for you to tell with any degree of certainty how the condition arose in this case?
No.
And why not?
Again, there are multiple ways that it can happen. Certainly it could be from any type of struggle where someone is in a fight or a struggle, like, for example, the first instance where there's a tug of war over Fatima and she goes down to the ground. Or the next instance might be where there's, I call it a dog pile, but there's a group of people who all fall on top of her. It could have happened there. There's an instance where they're on the ground and there's contact with her neck. It could have happened there. There's a struggle afterwards that I can't see in any of the videos. It could have happened there. I don't know.
Okay. And so once the person comes into the hospital and they are found to have this condition, is there typical conditions placed upon them when they're being observed?
Yes, so what we're concerned about, obviously, is that this condition's going to get worse. The patient may need to go to surgery. They may need to be heavily sedated so that a camera can be placed down their trachea or the esophagus, whichever one they're worried about. And in those cases, we don't want the patient to eat or drink anything because they are put at a great risk for aspiration during that procedure. So just like if I'm worried about someone with appendicitis, they come in with right lower abdominal pain, I'm going to have them not eat or drink anything until we know that it's not that and that they're not going to surgery. So we'll keep the person what we call NPO, or nothing by mouth, until we have a better idea of what the clinical picture is and if they need any further intervention.
Okay.
And then obviously we watch them. They're on a monitor. We're making sure that they're not going into any respiratory distress or cardiac distress or anything like that.
All right. And in this particular case, when you reviewed the medical records, did you see any sort of a specific treatment that was undertaken in this case?
I believe, obviously, observation, imaging in terms of x-rays, and then I believe an antibiotic was given and the patient was kept NPO, as we call it, or nothing by mouth.
Okay. And did you see any indication that there were any scopes done or anything else?
No.
And is that typical in a case like this?
I would say it is. With a very small amount of air that resolves, there's no reason to put that patient at risk because there's not an obvious ongoing air leak.
Okay. Is there typically any difference in a case of pneumomediastinum where a younger person is involved versus a full-grown adult?
The only thing that I would say is that younger patients, especially very young patients, have smaller airways, and so if there is some sort of compressive element, like an ongoing air leak, they can decompensate faster than adults, but the mechanism overall is the same. So they're treated the same way.
Okay. And can you tell me what tension mediastinum?
Yeah, so tension mediastinum again is pressure or tension on the contents of the mediastinum. And in that case, we're talking about compressive pressure on the heart. So if you can imagine your heart wants to beat in its usual fashion, if you're putting tension on it, just like if you're putting fluid around the sac in the heart's not able to beat as well as it would. And in fact, you can end up going into shock from that.
Okay. And if you have this tension mediastinum, then you have a more of a continual flow of air in, causing the pressure to build up? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Correct.
All right. And you had mentioned tears of the esophagus. Obviously, that's something that sounds pretty serious. What does that cause?
Again, so that can cause stomach contents to leak into the mediastinum. And again, that's really dangerous because of the risk of infection.
And again, no evidence of that in this case that you
No.
saw? Okay. What is a mucosal tear?
So the mucosa is like the lining of your mouth. Or the lining of your trachea. It's just a tear in that, in that material.
Okay. And was there one noted in this case?
It was suspected but not confirmed.
Okay. And what does that mean to you?
So you can't tell if someone has a mucosal tear in their esophagus or in their trachea by CT scan. You just can't see that level of detail. You need to go in with a scope and actually visually inspect it to see if there's a tear there, and that wasn't done in this case.
Okay. And is that generally, do you think, because this case resolved on its own?
Yes.
Okay. And what about mediastinitis? What is that?
So that would be inflammation around the mediastinum, as you would see with an esophageal tear, for example.
Okay. And you said one of the big issues that could be dangerous in certain cases of pneumomediastitis is infections?
It can be.
Okay. And were there any infections noted in the medical records in this case?
No.
Okay. So you said 80 to 90% of these cases typically resolve on their own. Does that just mean, what does that mean in terms of resolve on their own?
It means that we see some air where it's not supposed to be, and that it doesn't progress into a more dangerous condition, and that no intervention is needed, and so that's it. The patient gets better, and we don't need to do anything.
Okay. And so in your case, how would you classify the condition pneumomediastinum as it applies to Fatima?
I would say it was a mild presentation of it that resolved completely by the next day.
Okay. And given what you know, was this condition going to ever cause her death or kill her?
No.
Okay. And when something like this happens and it resolves, does it leave any permanent damage?
No,
And does it cause any permanent injury in any way?
no.